after Saturn to have them take one last glance homeward. From Saturn, the Earth would appear too small for Voyager to make out any detail. Our planet would be
When I was in high school, I spent my summers working in a summer camp. It was a small Boy Scout summer camp with no more than 30 staff members most years, and the years I spent there were some of the most formative and important times of my life. I am who I am today because of the people I met and the experiences we shared there. I haven't worked there in 4 years because I had to get a real job so I could pay rent, but I can still remember that camp so vividly. I could describe to you every inch of it in great detail because for 2 or 3 months out of every year, it was my entire life. I woke up there, I ate there, I worked there, and I slept there. Today, I would like to share with you one of my favorite places on the entire Earth, and a place that I would very much like to return to. I'm not talking about the entire camp. This video would be way too long if that were the case. Just one particular area. My area. I worked as the technology director for the camp. That's right. Even while working for a summer camp, I managed to stay indoors most of the time. My technology area was housed inside of a small building at the very entrance of the camp. The building also served as the camp office where the administrators worked, but the technology area was a larger, separate section of the building. There was a large wooden deck sticking off the front of the building. It had a picnic table and seating along the railings that overlooked the large open field that served as the center of the camp. The other side of the building faced the parking lot. On the far left side of the deck, there was a door leading into the office, and on the far right side, a door into the technology area. Like I said, it was a pretty small building. Just as an estimate, I'd say the entire room was maybe 600 or 700 square feet in total. Slightly smaller than my single bedroom apartment. However, unlike my apartment, it was just one big open room. It was rectangular in shape, and the walls were covered in dark wood paneling that gave off a very dated and rustic vibe. The floors were off-white tiles that were always coming apart, and the ceiling was just white squares and fluorescent lights. The ceiling hung very low enough that I, at 6 feet tall, could easily reach up and touch it without fully extending my arms. There were dark, circular spots on the ceiling from water damage. Like I said, it was a small camp, and one that was part of the Boy Scouts of America. We didn't have the money to repair a lot of stuff, so as they say, if it ain't broke, why fix it? We had tables set up all along both of the long sides of the room with 2 computers per table. If I remember correctly, there were 14 or 15 total, although not all of them worked very well. Our computers were very old Dell computers that were donated from a local college. During my second year on staff, I had to install Windows 7 onto all of them, which was partially out of date even at that time. We didn't have any of those fancy LCD monitors either. They were classic 20-pound tube monitors that were stored in a damp warehouse throughout the rest of the year, so they didn't work too well either. Each computer had to be connected via Ethernet to a single Ethernet switch that connected back to the router in the office. You can probably infer it at this point, but I will say it anyway. The internet was incredibly slow. On the walls, we had a bunch of old pictures from throughout the camp's history. The camp was founded in 1916, so there was a lot of history to showcase. We had pictures of the original staff, pictures of Boy Scout troops who stayed at the camp. We even had pictures of people constructing the very building we're talking about today. On the wall closest to the door sits 2 bathrooms. In my first year, one was a men's room and the other a women's. Eventually, however, we took down the signs and made them unisex since they were single-person bathrooms anyway. We had a large greenish cabinet that we stored merit badge class supplies inside of. If you're unfamiliar with the Boy Scouts, then merit badges are a set of requirements to learn a new skill or learn about a new subject. Boy Scouts going to summer camp spend about half their day learning merit badges. In the technology area, they learned about, technology. We taught computer science, programming, photography, robotics, and even space exploration, just to name a few. So inside the cabinet, we stored things like robotics kits and model rocket ship kits that the scouts would use during merit badge classes. In what was once the men's bathroom, we stored various supplies as well as extra computers that didn't work. We would take parts out of them when our working computers broke down so that we could keep them going as long as possible. Next to the two bathrooms was a small kitchen nook. It was just a few cabinets and a sink in the corner, very small. The cabinets were made of the same dark wood as the walls, and the countertop was just a simple white color. Finally, on the other end of the room, you had my own workspace. This wall was shared with the office portion of the building, and there was a big, rustic, wooden door in the middle that connected the two rooms. This door was interesting. It had a large metal locking mechanism that did not work very well, and looked like it had come right out of the 1800s. The door was actually split into two parts so that you could open just the top without opening the bottom half. The two halves were connected by another lock, and we hardly ever needed to unlock them. In fact, we really didn't need to open the door much at all. One of the years I worked there, they even put a filing cabinet in front of the door, probably to keep me out. Although in reality, it was just because of the noise. The bottom half of the door had a vent on it that you could hear through pretty easily, which was probably pretty annoying when I had a particularly noisy group of kids. So they moved something in front of it to block that out. Above the door was a small hole where the Ethernet cable came through the wall. This wall had old photos on it, but they were also accompanied by shelves upon shelves of old coffee mugs. They were all commemorative Boy Scouts of America mugs, and some of them dated back all the way into the 1960s. Most of them were attached to the shelves with screws, so the mugs themselves were completely unusable. Although a few of them were detached, and some of my fellow staff members took them home as a little souvenir. I have one myself. It's an all-white mug with a simple camp crest in red on one side. There's a large chip in it, although I can't remember if it had that when I took it or not. There's no date on this one, but I assume it's from the 80s or 90s. There's an odd gold trim around the top of the mug, and I cherish it deeply as a memory of my time there. As I said though, this wall was my own workspace. On the left side of the wall, I had a desk, and on the right, there was a desk for my staff member. His name was Justin, and he is a good friend of mine to this day. My desk was large and white with a gray top. There were shelves on one side, but they were constantly threatening to come off if I pulled them open too fast. I vaguely remember having to repair them at some point. I had a large gray office chair, and I usually draped a thick cardigan on the back of it in case it got cold. Even though I was there during summertime, it was summertime in a swamp area in the Midwest. It was cold most mornings and many evenings, and it rained a lot. One year in particular, it rained just about every other day, or sometimes for the whole week. There was a large river that ran on the outside of one of the fields, and that river would overflow from all the rain. It would flood about halfway up the field, so that the river started to look more like a lake. One of the other merit badge areas of the camp actually operated in that field, and they would often have to evacuate their supplies and teach somewhere else. So that's all to say, sometimes it got pretty cold, and I kept a cardigan close by. On my desk, I kept a laptop and some binders where I would keep track of merit badge progress and what needed to be done each day. I also usually had a water bottle because hydration is important, some sunflower seeds for snacking, and the all-important speakers for music. My staff member Justin's desk had a metal frame and a wood top, and he kept various things on it as well, although I could not tell you what. In the opposite corner from the door to enter the area, there was another door that led out onto a concrete porch area where we would often teach merit badge classes. This area had a part of the roof hanging over it, so it was still usable in the rain. Back on the inside, we had a gigantic wooden table right in the center of the room. By gigantic, I mean that this table was probably 10 feet in length across and 5 feet wide at its widest. It was made entirely of solid, dark wood and weighed a ton. Believe me, you would not have wanted to move this thing. The table was flat on the ends, but curved to an oval shape on the long sides. It was not in the best condition, but it was sturdy as hell to say the least. There were scratches all over it and spots where it was chipped. There were also plenty of marks from where people had stabbed knives into the table. If that sounds unusual to you, you've clearly never been to a Boy Scout summer camp. Some of the stab marks may have even originated from yours truly. A lot of things changed about that technology area over the years that I worked there. We had 2 different sets of computers, and I had moved the furniture around. My first year there, we had this absolutely disgusting futon that eventually disappeared. The archery director, an older guy who went by the name Wishbone, once replaced the crumbling floor tiles, only for those new ones to eventually crumble as well. We even had a wall-mounted air conditioner that somehow moved from one wall to another. Of all the things that changed in that room, that giant, heavy table was always there, and I loved it. I loved everything about that room. I loved the extremely old orange and white office chairs with random, unexplainable stains that I'm pretty sure were made in the 1970s. I loved the barely functional computers that teenagers barely knew how to use. If that summer camp is a second home to me, that technology area is my bedroom. Working for a summer camp can be, and often is, a pretty hectic experience, especially once you start getting into managing areas of the camp. You're often working for 16 or more hours a day, running on 3 to 4 hours of sleep, and dealing with groups of rambunctious teenagers throughout all of it. It's also essentially an all-day performance. Something I learned was that the way I treated the scouts would make or break their summer camp experience. If you're rude to them even once, they'll remember it and avoid you for the whole week. On the other hand, if you work super hard to make sure they have a memorable and fun experience, they will remember you for years to come. After I stopped working there, I would still come down and visit for 3 or 4 days during the camp season and help out wherever they needed some support. When I did that, I would have kids coming and saying hi to me constantly and asking me why I wasn't working there anymore. They would try to convince me to quit my job and come hang out with them again. It was incredibly heartwarming, but that's not why I'm talking about it right now. What I am trying to say is that no matter what was going on in my day, the scouts couldn't see it. I had to be on 100% of the time and ready to be happy and energetic around them so that they could have a good time. It did not matter if I had gotten 2 hours of sleep the night before. It did not matter if I had to skip breakfast that day and was running on empty. It didn't matter if I had totaled my car the week before. And to answer your question, yes, that did happen. No matter how I was doing emotionally or physically, I had to make sure they were having the best possible time. We often referred to this constant state of positive energy as camp face. I would wake up at 7 a.m. every day to get a quick shower before breakfast at 7:45. From 7:45 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night when the scouts went to sleep, I had to have my camp face on. Even after 10, I usually wasn't done working for the night. It was truly exhausting. Working summer camp staff is not for the faint of heart. This also means that any downtime I did manage to get was extremely valuable. The beginning of the day is already hectic at a Boy Scout summer camp. Kids at breakfast time are ridiculously energetic. So when you sit down to eat with them, you have to match their energy level to get them excited for the day. You play games with them. Ask them how their week is going. Ask them what merit badges they're excited about. And if you're lucky, you might get to have a normal adult conversation with one of the Scoutmasters. After breakfast, there's about half an hour before the first set of merit badges start up. I would walk from the dining hall to my technology area and unlock the door to start the day. This was my first chance to relax in my day. The feeling of walking into the tech area bright and early in the morning is a feeling I will never forget, and a place of peace that I often wish I could relive. The camp was in a swamp area, so the day would never start out warm. It would be a cold walk up the steps onto the deck in front of the building. The windows would be fogged over with precipitation, so you could barely see inside. The wood of the deck would groan beneath my feet, as if to say they are not quite awake yet either. Some scouts would be waiting outside, but they all knew the rules. They don't get to come inside until the first class starts. There was no real reason for this other than to give me a chance to breathe before the day truly began. I opened the door and walked inside and felt the brisk, cold air embrace me. We had an air conditioner that would run throughout the day to keep the room cold when it did get hot. I, of course, turned it off every night, but the air would be trapped in the building as the temperature outside lowered. Yes, it was indeed colder in the tech area every morning than it was outside. I don't like the cold, so you would think I hated this, but I actually found it very comforting. That brisk, cold air was an indicator in my mind that it was time for a short break before the chaos took over again. It made me feel at peace. It's a feeling that puts me at ease just thinking about it. From there, I would go around and turn on all the computers and start going over my lesson plan to see what I had to do today. I really enjoyed the quiet whirring of old computers starting up. I would turn on my laptop and start playing some music while I waited out the clock. I always kept the lights off before the classes started. Dim rays of morning sun would come through the fogged over windows, just barely giving me enough light to work. Justin and I would chat and joke around for the last few minutes before opening the door. Finally, I would turn on the lights, open the door, and put on my camp face. This period of time was only half an hour every day. It was, however, one of the most peaceful times for me, and a feeling I wish I could relive just one more time. It's a feeling so burned into my mind that I doubt I will ever forget it. On the other end of the spectrum, I also found my peace once the sun set and the scouts went to bed. Late at night, the other staff members would use my area as a space to hang out and talk or finish up some work before turning into bed themselves. I am kind of a loner, and I tend to prefer being by myself, but this was definitely an exception. When you work for a summer camp, especially one as small as mine, the people you work with become your family through a mutual desire to run a successful camp. The 16-hour days, the lack of sleep, and the constant performance you're putting on for the scouts are all things you share with the people you spend every single day with. For 2 months, you live the same life as them, and you grow incredibly close. To this day, I have never been as close and comfortable with a group of people as I was with my camp family. A lot of the people I worked with are people I still consider close friends, and people I hope to stay close to for the rest of my life. I met so many people that I love and respect, so much that they became my role models and have shaped the kind of person I want to be. All that is to say, I loved every second I got to spend with them in my tech area. We would talk about life, complain about the day, and play Magic the Gathering. That's right, Boy Scouts of America camp staff are huge Magic nerds. Or at least mine were. Sleep was obviously important in itself, but we needed time to decompress and hang out, and this was the time to do it. Even the nights we had to stay up until 4 in the morning working through paperwork were incredibly peaceful in my mind because I still have not to this day felt more like I belonged than when I was with them. At the end of the camp season, it was always my job as tech director and resident video producer to put together a staff slideshow. It was my job to make a camp slideshow at the end of every week for the scouts to see too, but the staff slideshow was a different kind of ordeal. I put way more time and effort into them because they needed to be special, and they needed to capture the magic of working that year as best as they could. I only made 3 of these, but I specifically recall putting together each one because I put so much love into each of them. The year is 2015. The camp season has just about drawn to a close. We are on the last night of the last week of scouts actually being in the camp. The scouts will be leaving the following morning, and later that day, we will be holding a staff banquet to celebrate another successful year. I will be showing my staff slideshow during that banquet, and I need to finish it tonight. This night is really special to me, and something I always remember fondly. I say that I needed to finish the slideshow, but it was more of a group project. We were doing a themed slideshow where we made a custom Magic the Gathering card for every single staff member and showed it along with a picture of them at some point in the slideshow. Not all of the cards were quite finished yet, so Justin, my friend Kyler, and another guy named Jared were finishing them up while I worked. They were great to have around, to bounce ideas off of and joke around with, so I didn't lose my mind trying to crunch together this video. Eventually, we turned off the lights, so the only light coming in was from my laptop screen and the phone screens in the room. It grew later, and it got quieter as we all started to let the exhaustion of 6 weeks of summer camp staff take over. The cards got finished, and I got to work plugging them in. I have a tendency, as a video editor, to completely shut out any need for sleep and food when I'm really focused on a video. I mean, even right now, it's 3 hours later than when I normally go to bed, and I'm starving because I'm super focused on this script. So even though at that time I could have gone to sleep and picked back up in the morning, I just kept working as the night washed over my friends. Phone screens went dark, and they began to doze off in those 1970s stained office chairs while I corrected tiny mistakes in the slideshow. Soon, all that was left was the dim light of my laptop and the quiet whirring sound it created. When I finally finished the slideshow and hit export, it hit me how late it was and how tired I was as I looked around at my unconscious family. I remember thinking about how I could not believe they stayed up so late to help me, and that I loved them all so much I did not want the summer to end. Even as tired as I was, I wanted to drag out that moment and stay in that place. These thoughts of belonging and comfortability rocked me to sleep in my chair. I must have done a good job conveying those same feelings into our slideshow, because when we showed it the next day, nearly everybody in the room started crying. It's sad to think that all things will come to an end. It's sad to think that even the happiest things in your life can't last forever. I doubt a week has gone by in the past 4 years that I haven't thought about how badly I want those times back. At the same time though, I feel extremely lucky knowing I got to have them in the first place. Even if I were to work in that building at that summer camp again, it would never be the same. If I were to work there again, I would form a new set of memories that would feel completely separate from the originals. It's easy to think back to a time that made you happy or made you feel at peace. What's difficult is to imagine that you can form new memories that you will cherish just as much, even if the time and place are vastly different. My time working for summer camps has ended, and I can never get that time back. However, I look forward to the new memories and experiences I will form that I will look back on just as fondly. Thinking about those times brings me a great sense of peace, and I hope it can somehow do the same for you. After all, we all need a little taste of peace and tranquility right now.